the edge of the familiar, where your comfort zone ends and the unknown stretches before you. That's where greatness awaits. Are you ready to take that leap? This is the Risk Big podcast with your host, Travis Fitzwater.
Hey friends, thanks for listening to the podcast today. I've got with me as my guest today, Grant Baldwin, who is an entrepreneur, a public speaker, an author, and the father of 3 daughters, just like me. Really excited to have this conversation. A couple years ago, I learned of Grant's work and what he does as an entrepreneur through his podcast that I was referred to by another podcast I was listening to, and I was really interested in the idea of public speaking. And so I listened to, dozens of his episodes. The Speaker Lab podcast. You can find it on iTunes or anywhere you listen to podcasts, but the Speaker Lab podcast was an incredible resource. It's just free information on how to become a booked and paid public speaker. Really great content, but he is now running that from his home in Nashville. He has a young family. He started from the ground up. He's got a great story about how he's become this entrepreneur, how he grinds out what he does, and has been successful. He talks about the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, never knowing what's coming in financially and what is when you're going to knock it out of the park. He talks a little bit about those finances, but I'm really excited to talk to Grant Baldwin as he's got a great story. He's again got 3 daughters, just like me. I feel like very relatable. He likes to golf, which is nice too. But I had a great conversation with Grant, and I really look forward to you listening into that. And it's coming up. But before then, I've got a short ditty here for you, and then we'll get started. Hey friends, welcome again to the Risk Big podcast. I want to tell you really quickly before we get started with our podcast episode about a utility that I've used over the last couple of years that I've really enjoyed for its ability to connect me with others. And it's a way for me to use my phone to send actual greeting cards in the mail directly to friends, families, connections, acquaintances, business partners, whoever, right from my phone, and completely custom cards. I can use my own handwriting. I can use my own signatures. I can put in photos from my very own phone. It's a really amazing utility. I do it all from my phone. It's an app that you can use, and I'd love to tell you all about it. All you have to do is send me your email at travis@fitzmedia.co. We'll put you on our list, and we'll send you more details about it. If you're interested in being able to connect with people, sending literal greeting cards, custom greeting cards directly to someone's mailbox, their physical mailbox, it's an amazing tool that's helped me connect with others in some significant ways, and I would love to tell you more about it. So send us your email at travis@fitzmedia.co. That's travis@fitzmedia.co, and we will send you more information. So I'm here with Grant Baldwin, who is the founder of SpeakerLab.com, a famous public speaker across the nation. A really neat story. I'm really glad and excited to get to interview him today for the Risk Big podcast. It's just really fun. A couple years ago, I got into his podcast, just loved it. It was all this free content on how you can become a public speaker, and he's got all that at the SpeakerLab.com. You can find him online by searching just Grant Baldwin, but glad to have you on the show, Grant. Thanks for taking some time.
Travis, totally my pleasure. I appreciate you letting me hang out with you.
Yeah, this is great. So tell me, how did you start in public speaking? If you go to your website, you can see all this stuff. So again, grantbaldwin.com or thespeakerlab.com, but kind of give us maybe a little bit of the background that you don't see on the website.
Yeah. So long story short, in high school, I was really involved in my local church, and my youth pastor had a really big impact on my life and was just a phenomenal speaker. And I really resonated with him and clicked with him. And I was like, I want to do that. That seems like a great gig. And so then in college, I actually worked for a guy who was a full-time speaker and kind of got to see a little bit of the back end of how did he find and book gigs, and helped with like logistics and contracts and travel and that kind of thing. And then actually after college was a youth pastor at a local church. So it gave me a lot of opportunities to speak, weekly opportunities to speak. And so definitely got better just with more reps. But it's one of those things that I just quickly found like I really enjoy this. This is something I feel like I'm decent at and want to do more of. And it was a lot of fun. So after I left that position, for a little while, I was just trying to figure out what do I want to do with my life? And the thing I kept coming back to was speaking, and so wanted to do more of it. So we started figuring that world out and trying to understand how do you find and book gigs, and who books speakers, and how do you what do you speak about, and what do you charge, and just the whole oftentimes for a lot of people the whole speaking world just kind of this mysterious black box. And so did that for several years and spoke at 50, 60, 70 events a year all over North America. Really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, but also had a lot of people who were asking me like, hey Grant, I want to be a speaker. How would I go about doing that? And some people who wanted to do it to the level I was doing it, was doing, again, a whole bunch of events. And some people who would ask and say, hey, I got a full-time gig, or I've got something else going on, but I'd love to do, maybe 5 gigs a year. And I just don't know how to find those 5, and everything in between. So we started what today is now the Speaker Lab, and have a couple different programs and trainings inside of that, of just walking people through how to find and book gigs and how speaking can fit into someone's business. And so yeah, that's a lot of what we do today.
It's a great story, and I've loved kind of following it a little bit over the last couple of years. But how did you, when you started, how you were building? You had a young family. You still have a young family, but you're starting out. How does your wife adapt to this, and how does your family adapt to you doing these gigs? I think I heard an interview with Jane Atkinson that you did 70 gigs one year. Is probably your biggest year. That's a lot with travel. That's not just one day. That's multiple days. How did your family deal with that? How did you and your wife handle that?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that when it wasn't like you start speaking on a Friday, and by Monday you have a full slate of 70 gigs. So it's really kind of a gradual process. And I think it was just kind of, to some degree, like you just kind of figure it out as you go, and I think there's still times where my wife looks back and she's like, how did we do that? Why did we do that? That was crazy, but I think it was just a matter of of us being on the same page and working together. I'm very blessed that I have a phenomenal wife who is extremely supportive of whatever the random thing is I want to chase or pursue that week. And she just kind of figured it out. And I think one of the other things that was helpful was recognizing the seasons of it. And I think everything in business and in life, there are seasons. And so if you're in the thick of something, it's always good, positive or negative. It's always good to ask yourself, is this a season, or is this the way it is? Is this a season, or is this the way it is? Meaning that if you're an accountant, tax time is going to be really, really busy. Is it going to be like that year round? Probably not. But for a couple months, or even just a couple weeks, it's going to be a little chaotic, but it's not always like that. And it's the same thing was true for me with speaking. For a lot of speakers, is it can be somewhat seasonal, meaning that spring and fall are typically busy. Summer and winter are a little bit slower. So for example, like after Thanksgiving, there's hardly anybody that's booking speakers for anything until, like mid-January. So there's about almost a 2-month stretch there where you might have a gig or two, but it's not much. And so there's that side of it too, of realizing, okay, there may be a 3-week stretch where I'm gone a whole bunch of nights doing a whole bunch of gigs, but there may also come a stretch of 3 weeks where I'm home every single day. And so there's that other side of it. The other thing too is, I think I had I think something that helped a lot was I would come home from a gig, and I would be able to be home. So it wasn't like I have some friends who work in the corporate world, and they travel a decent amount, and when they come home from a trip, they got to turn around and be in the office the next day. So for me, I think I had a bit of the luxury of, because I was working for myself, because I was building this, I could come home from a trip, and if I was home for the next couple of days, I could be home instead of having to go to an office or something like that. So that definitely made a difference as well. But I think it's one of those things like you just figure it out as you go, and you adjust as you go. It kind of goes back to that. When's the perfect time to do anything? When's the perfect time to start a business, or to quit your job, or to move, or to, make any type of big life transition, or start a family? Like there's never a perfect time. So was it the perfect time for us to start a business, for me to start traveling while we had, young children and we were newly married? Maybe not, but I don't know that there's any perfect ideal time. Plus, you don't want to just be waiting around for all the stars to align to the point that you never take any action on anything. So, it was like there like the running joke was every time Dad would leave, like someone would get sick or something would happen, and my wife would call and be like, hey, such and such is puking, and I'm like, I'm 3 time zones away. I don't, I can't help right now.
Yeah, I completely get that.
So it's just, it's kind of, it's the trade-off for sure. It's the downside of being a speaker is that you are gone and that you do travel a lot. But as far as the adjustments goes, you honestly just kind of figure it out as you go.
Sure. And a follow-up to that I think is fascinating, and I'd love for you to speak into it, is what were some essential elements as you were starting this? What were some essential elements that maybe nobody knew about as you were starting that you would say are maybe universal truths in building a business that somebody else could be encouraged by, or that you would say, listen, if you don't have this quality, you're not going to go very far. If you don't do this, if you don't decide to persist, what are some of those things that maybe you don't get to talk about that often that really stand out at the beginning, especially?
Yeah, especially in the beginning, I think that it's recognizing there's the skill set of what it is, that whatever the product or service is that you deliver, and then there's the skill set of selling and marketing that thing. And I'll explain what I mean. There's a really good book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And one of the things he talks about is the difference between he talks about the analogy of let's say someone's really good at baking bread. And he talks about being a baker and running a bakery are 2 totally different skill sets, right? And just because someone's amazing at cooking doesn't necessarily mean that they should open a restaurant. And so I find that there's a lot of speakers who are amazing on stage and who are complete disasters whenever it comes to running the business. Or they just say, hey, I just want to be a really good speaker, and I just sit back and I hope that the phone rings. And there's some speakers that can get away with that, but most speakers cannot. And so one of the things that I felt like that I did a good job with, and that we teach our students today to do, is that you have to be really diligent about finding gigs and reaching out and promoting and marketing yourself, which can be uncomfortable for a lot of people, right? But sitting back and like, well, I hope someone magically finds me, and I hope someone reaches out to me, and like wishing, waiting, hoping, that's not a strategy. Like that doesn't work. And so you have to be intentional about going out and finding people who are looking for a speaker like you, who are looking for what the solution is that you offer. And again, that's not exclusive to just speakers. That's for anything. So I was a couple days ago, my aunt and uncle were in town, and my aunt is an amazing like pastry chef. Like she's amazing at cakes and cupcakes and and like desserts and just amazing at that. And so she said for a long time, she's wanted to open her own shop. And so one of the things we were talking about was, again, you may be the best pastry chef on the planet, and that'll get you somewhere, because like having a really, really good product absolutely makes a difference. But if nobody knows you exist, then it doesn't matter. And so you have to be able to promote it and market it as well. And so that's the part I think a lot of people have a hard time with, is like, I don't want to promote, I don't want to market whatever my product or service is. I just want to make my art and hope people find it. But like if you're serious about, like, you want to eat and live indoors and make a business out of whatever that thing is, then you have to treat this differently. You have to let people know that you exist. Otherwise, you'll just kind of exist in a vacuum.
And how did you, at that beginning especially, how did you use relationships, maybe personal relationships even? Obviously you had your wife there, I assume was encouraging you in your passion to be a public speaker, and then you kind of transitioned a little bit into teaching people how to do this. So maybe you're not out on the road 70 gigs a year, maybe a lot less than that, a little bit more, revenue coming in from the online stuff. But how did relationships, I've found just in the political game that I play, relationships make the world go round. But how do you have a group of friends that you lean on for advice and kind of bounce things off of? Or have you kind of just done this? You haven't done it on your own, obviously you have your wife, but what do relationships look like in the midst of moving your business forward?
Yeah, I'll answer it a couple different ways. So from like from the customer side of it, building any type of business, and especially something like speaking, it's a very long term. You have to take a very long term approach to that. So it's kind of like if my middle daughter was planting a garden recently, and she can stick seeds in the ground, but you may not see anything from those seeds for weeks or months. Now that doesn't mean nothing's happening. You just can't see it. And so the same thing is true with speaking or any type of like service-based business, where a lot of it is a relationship business. And the reality is that relationships matter, but relationships take time. And so it's not always just I'm trying to get in, book the gig, get out, and move on. Sometimes it takes a while to build rapport, build connection with a potential client that may turn into something. So having a long-term perspective on the business and knowing that it's something that's going to take time, because relationship takes time, absolutely helps. Another thing I would say would be, you kind of alluded to having colleagues or peers in your world. So I would say this, like, being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. Like there are days where you're just like, oh man, like business is good, like we're crushing it, all is well. And days you're like, what the heck am I doing? Like this is not going well, and I don't know why. And so it's really, really important to surround yourself with others who understand that and get that. So my wife is absolutely like my biggest fan and biggest cheerleader and supporter. But she's not at all involved in the day-to-day of our business. Like she can tell you big picture, high level what we do, but she wouldn't have any idea what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, nor does she have any desire to. And that's totally fine. So I have a small mastermind of 4 other guys that I'm really close with, all who do similar things, but in other industries and spaces. And so we talk on a daily basis, just comparing notes of, hey, here's what's working, here's what's not working. We're talking strategy, but then we're also just talking like big picture life, because it's important to us that we're successful entrepreneurs, but it's also really important that we are good husbands and good fathers and good decent human beings.
Yeah.
And so for example, at the time of this recording, 2 days ago, we spent a full day. Everybody came to town, and we met for a full day of just kind of brainstorming, talking shop, and talking life. And we spent a lot of time, not necessarily talking like, "Hey, here's the latest business strategy that's working," but just talking about how can we continue to be better husbands and be better fathers, and how do we continue to balance, our ambitions of work and what it is that we want to do with our businesses and companies, but also, not like, overdoing it or overkilling ourselves or anything like that. So, having people in your corner absolutely matters, that you can go on the journey with.
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic. I'm glad you kind of got to it, and it's going to lead into my next question about a speech that you gave that you've got on your YouTube account. But before we get there, I think the topic of relationship, especially for men, is interesting in our society, because I think we've grown up in a society where we haven't really been taught how to have, to have decent relationships with other men, like what friendship looks like, how to be honest about where we are, which is okay, and how to really allow others to help carry the load of the world, which is heavy many, many times, often. And I think that's so crucial. It's actually led me to draw up an outline of a book I'd like to write about relationships and men becoming better at them. But I think our society sorely lacks men that can relate. Yeah, and it's a social media thing. You can blame it on a million different things. When I look at my dad, who I love dearly and I work with, he doesn't necessarily have dear friends. He's got a lot of acquaintances, but he doesn't necessarily have those close friends. And I think that's something our society misses. And it's for important reasons, like having some people to lean on when you're dealing with marriage issues, or you're dealing with life issues or kid issues, or things that go well beyond what you do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, and I think that's one of the things that why, myself and these other guys click well and resonate well is, we're in a similar boat in terms of stage of life and entrepreneurship and what we're trying to, build and accomplish. Another thing I would say would be, like, we've all known each other for a long time too. And so we all have kind of, all of our businesses have kind of come up and evolved and grown together. So these are not, a group of strangers that, we just kind of randomly met up once, and, but something that's taken time and built real deep friendships, and people that, I consider my closest allies and closest friends. And so, entrepreneurship, but not just entrepreneurship, but just life in general. Like I'm a pretty introverted guy. And so I'm completely actually fine to, be home and head down on the office working. But I also know that, it's important to surround myself with other people who are, who are building something, who are also who are successful as entrepreneurs, but also just, again, it's a high priority for them to be, successful husbands and fathers. Like those things really, really matter. So being around that absolutely, rubs off on you.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And it leads into my next question on your YouTube account, which I love the new stuff that you're doing, but you have a couple of years old demo videos, and one of them, probably the most recent, I assume the most recent demo video that you have online on your YouTube account. You mentioned in that video that who you are is more important than what you do. Yeah. And I just think that's just a tremendous statement. And I'd love for you to expound on that just a little bit, because I think it's crucial, especially for professionals in our day and age. I think you can easily get wrapped up in the identity of what you're doing as being the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely ties into a lot of what we've talked about here, that, if we are successful, entrepreneurs or politicians or corporate employees, or we climb the corporate ladder, we check all the boxes and we have the big bank account or big house or car or whatever that aspiration is. But we do all of those at the detriment of, if we have a crappy relationship with our spouse, or if we have zero relationship with our kids, or we're just a shell of a human being, or physically we're out of shape and falling apart, like we were doing it wrong. Like, what's the point of that? If I make a difference in all these other people's lives, and I'm successful as an entrepreneur, speaker, or whatever, but my daughters are like, I didn't really have a relationship with my dad. He was just always gone or always helping someone else, but never really hung out with me. Like, I have failed miserably. So, my wife had a choice. Like, she could have backed out long before she made the commitment, but now she's stuck with me. But my daughters didn't get a vote. Like, they just kind of, they come into the world like, okay, you're the guy. I guess we're stuck with you now. So I want to make sure that I am an absolute phenomenal father to them. And I think I can have my cake and eat it too, meaning that I can be a phenomenal husband and be a phenomenal father and also be a phenomenal entrepreneur. I don't think it's necessarily like an either or.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I would love to just follow up with maybe a personal thought. But how do your daughters deal with you in this role? Obviously, you have some flexibility that others, and you mentioned that others don't have when you are home. But how does your family deal with the profession that you're in?
The profession I'm in has definitely evolved. So like when they were all real little, they're now, 13, 10, and 8. And so they when they were all real young is when I was really traveling a lot. So we can definitely stay involved and stay connected, meaning like we're FaceTiming constantly or texting constantly or calling and checking in constantly and those type of things. We would bring them on trips from time to time. So if I was going somewhere fun and sunny, then they'd like to tag along, and if I was going to North Dakota in December, then I was typically on my own. So that was one thing that definitely helped, and I think part of it, like, they grew up not knowing any different, so it wasn't like this they're halfway into life at home with dad, and all of a sudden he was here all the time and now he's gone all the time. In fact, it's kind of been the opposite, where initially I was gone quite a bit, and now I still speak some, but not nearly as much as I used to. And so actually today, I work from home. I've been self-employed for, I think, 13 years now. I work out of the house, and we homeschool the girls. My wife does 99% of that. And so as it is today, we are all home together all the time. And on one hand, you're like, oh, that's so cool. And on the other hand, you're like, no, you didn't hear me correctly. Like, we're all together all the time.
Yeah, my wife homeschools our daughters too.
Yeah, so you need some, like, there's certainly pros to it. Like, well, now that we've hit, at the time of this recording, we're hitting summertime and everybody's planning summer vacations and that kind of stuff. Like, we like to travel, we like to do trips and have experiences, and we try to do those when everybody else is in school. And so, so we just, we have a lot of freedom and flexibility with life. And so even though, like, I work from home and I work a lot, and I really enjoy what I do, I also spend a lot of time hanging out with my family and have a lot of freedom and flexibility. So right before we started, this call, pop out and say hey to the girls and see how everybody's doing, and everybody kind of comes and goes. And so I think that from that standpoint, it's definitely a lifestyle that we have chosen and been very intentional about to have the amount of time together that we have.
That's terrific for many different reasons. But when you write the book on how to raise 3 daughters, if you could just let me know so I can buy as many copies as possible. That'd be really
None
helpful.
of us know what we're doing. I think there's, and then, you know what, this isn't true with just parenting, but with entrepreneurship, with any part of life. Like, we are all making it up as we go, and I am absolutely no different than that. Like, there's entrepreneurs I talk to all the time, and we're all just like, we're just figuring it out as we go. And parenting boys, parenting girls is absolutely the same thing. And so, you and I have a collection of girls that we've been blessed with and absolutely love it. And there's days you're like, man, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a pretty good dad. And days you're like, man, I think we screwed something up along the way and I don't know what it is. And I hope it all works out okay. And again, every day in between. So, that's part of it is you're doing the best you can and figuring it out as you go.
Yeah. So changing directions a little bit, and we'll just go for another couple minutes because I know you're short on time. But as far as when you were starting, mentally, what did it take for you to really kind of persist? I know you basically said you committed to it, you knew you wanted to do it, and so you really fought for it. But mentally, like how do you go through those times?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, when we were meeting a couple of days ago, this little mastermind group of guys and I, that's one of the things that we talked about is just having a real long-term perspective and just sticking with it. Like there's so many people that are trying to start a business or trying to do, trying to start something. And it's not even necessarily just from a business or professional side, but it could be, you're trying to eat clean, or you're trying to lose weight and exercise more, or you're trying to, build a relationship or connection with some person. And we just don't, if we don't see the results overnight, like it's so much simpler just to throw in the towel and quit. And so I think that, for me personally, if I've had any level of success, it's because we've just been like head down and focused and not chasing shiny objects and like sticking with something long term. And there's plenty of people I've seen who in the speaking world who either teach speaking or who are speakers who just come and go. And so I get it, like in the standpoint that there are certainly things that have come across my radar in life that I've been like interested in or fascinated by that I've just never really stuck with and never really pursued. But I think the understanding then is you can't expect someone else's results if you're not willing to do the same work. Meaning that if I'm just like kicking the tires of, I was trying to think of a good example. Okay, here's an example. So I like playing golf. Golf's a lot of fun for me, but I don't do it a ton, and I rarely go to the driving range.
What's
I just
your
like
handicap?
To go,
What's your handicap? Do you know your handicap?
I don't. Like that would be it. Not good. And so, okay, so it sounds you're asking a question, so I'm assuming you're a decent golfer?
I love golf, yeah.
Okay, so if you and I go out and play and you're just crushing me and you're out driving me, you're dropping putts left and right, you're birdie, par, and I'm just bogey, double, and it's a disaster. Like I can't be mad that you're better if you've put in the work that I haven't put in. And so one of the things that we talk with speakers about is, are you interested or committed? Are you interested? Or I'm interested in golf, but I'm not super committed to it. So I can't be ticked off that I don't have the same results as you if you're way more committed and all in on it, and you've put in the work and practice versus I'm just kind of like, I just like to play from time to time. It's kind of fun, And so just I think having that long-term perspective of, okay, if I want to get better or if I want to improve or if I want my business to grow, then I have to be committed to it. And it's a very different approach than I'm kind of interested in it, And so being self-employed allows you a lot of freedom and flexibility, but I get up and I'm in the office by usually 7:30 every day, and I have my head down. I'm working. So, again, even though I can come and go, and there's certainly times that I take that liberty, like I take this very seriously. This is how we make a living. And so I have to be more than just kind of like, well, this would be kind of, let's play business today, or let's play speaker today, or anything like that. Like, no, like I have to have a level of commitment to this that is going to produce the kind of results and the outcome that ultimately I'm going for.
Yeah, and the intent of this podcast is really, I want people to do what they're passionate about. If that means starting a business, then do it. But you have to kind of know once you're getting into it, you've got to commit to it. You can't just sit on your hands. You can't expect it just to come to you. It's a grind. And I would say that there's probably many people out there that say, oh, if you can be a public speaker, if you're good enough, people just come to you and give you however many thousands of dollars, and you just make it without necessarily a lot of work. You just need a couple gigs to prove yourself. And I think it's almost any path you go down. If you're passionate about it, you got to let your passion kind of move you in the direction of persisting and having that mentality that you can't give up, first of all. But I think it's just crucial that you keep moving forward. And I think it's a great piece of your story is you're starting out and 13 years ago or whenever it was, and you're starting a family, and you're just all in. You're like, this is the dream. I want to do this. And there's no turning back at that point. And I heard another podcast interview, and it may have been with Jane Atkinson the other day when I listened to it. But you mentioned that you were doing 3 other jobs too before it wasn't just like it just came to you. You were working a handful of jobs, and you were like, but I've got to do this because this is where my heart is. And I thought that was tremendous.
Yeah. I'll give a quick anecdote of something I think I've shared before, but I remember a couple years ago, I live here in Nashville, and was at like an entrepreneur's breakfast or something like that. And there's a guy that I know that was there who had been working on like his side hustle for a little while, and is trying to get this business off the ground, and been working a full-time job as well. And so he had just quit the full-time job the week before, and this was his first week of like full-time, all-in, self-employed entrepreneurship land. And I said, man, it's your first week. How you feeling? And he said, man, I'm excited, and I'm scared, and I'm nervous, and I'm anxious, and just like the wide range of emotions, right? And I told him, I was like, I've been self-employed for a long time now, and that doesn't go away. Like this particular week, this particular month, actually, this has been the best month in our company's history. But a couple of months ago was one of the slowest months that we've had. And it just like, man, I wish it was just like, man, it's just all gravy every single day.
Yeah,
it's just smooth sailing. And it's just not, like some days you kill it and some days you don't. And a lot of those times you don't necessarily know why. This particular, like yesterday, at the time of this recording, yesterday was an amazing day for our business. Today's been really, really slow. I don't know. And so maybe tomorrow will be somewhere in the middle. Who knows, So I think just being able to like mentally balance that, and like the mental game of entrepreneurship is just as important as any type of tactic or strategy.
Oh, I guess it's so true. The last question I'll have for you before I let you go here is, maybe actually I may have one other one, but it's really surfacey. But what advice would you give, and I try to ask everybody this in the podcast, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to pursue their passion, whatever it would be, as an entrepreneur or whatever field they take up? What would be some advice you'd give to them?
Yeah, I think one of the best things you can do is look for someone who's doing something similar to what you want to do and doing it in a way that you want to do it. Okay, and let me break that down. One would be to look for someone who's doing something similar, but also like close to where you're at. Not necessarily geographically, although that can certainly help. But if I was a brand new speaker, I'd done, spoke a couple of times and decided, all right, I want to do this professionally. And then I'm looking for some models or examples or people I can learn from. I'm like, okay, let's see who all is out there. Well, Tony Robbins, he's a speaker. What's Tony up to these days? I'll just do what he does. Like, well, what Tony is doing is very, very different than what you would do whenever you're getting started. So you have to factor in like, okay, he's doing something that he's been doing for 30 plus years, and he's just in a different league than where most speakers are at. So you have to look for someone who is a step or two ahead of you of what it is that they're doing and where it is that they're at. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say would be to look for someone who's doing it in a way that you want to do it. Meaning that whenever I got started, I was a former youth pastor. And so I got my start speaking at a lot of high school and college events, a lot of education events. And so I met a couple of speakers who were speaking at the same type of events, who were a step or two ahead of me. And so I could have connected with some people who were, more just public speakers in general, professional speakers in general, but maybe speaking to different audiences. But finding someone who's doing something similar, someone that I resonated with and clicked with, that similar stuff of what we've covered so far, that I wanted to learn from, not just because of who they were, quote unquote, on stage and what their business looked like, but I also just like they were a good human being. Like they were good, they're a good husband or a good father or a good, just a good person. Like paying attention to those things mattered as well. So I think one of the best things you can do is find someone who, again, is doing something that you want to do and doing it in a way that you want to do it, who's a step or two ahead of you, that you don't have to necessarily be a copycat of, but you can model and learn from and figure out what's working for them and why is that working for them and how would that look in my business and how can I apply that to what I'm trying to do and trying to accomplish. And I think just having some examples of people who are a step or two ahead of you in any area of life can make a big, big difference.
Yeah, and many years ago, somebody told me that it's important to have people that are older than you, people that are your age, and people that are younger than you in your life that you can invest in, be invested in, buy, and walk with. And I think that's a really, really important piece, especially as you're going into something you're passionate about. Those are some great thoughts. Well, Grant, thank you so much for the time. The last thing I'll say is I'm really, really excited that you're a St. Louis Cardinals fan. Another YouTube video you have on there is you reacting to David Freese's home run, Game 6. 2011.
Yes,
we went on to win Game 7. We're all here in Missouri. We're all big fans of that. So
I was at Game 7.
Were you? Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Of course you were.
That's part of why I was so excited. Was crazy story. So for those who are Cardinal fans who are listening, you'll remember the 2011 series, where I don't know if you remember early in the series there was one of the games was rained out, and so it pushed everything back a day. So originally I had tickets with my dad to go. My dad's a huge Cardinals fan and would go to a bunch of games, and so he had tickets to all the home games for that series, and so I was going to go with him to Game 6, and ended up when they got pushed back, the guy he was going to go with to Game 7, if there was a Game 7, couldn't go, and so he had to go to Game 6. So I ended up going to Game 7. So part of my reaction to that video was, it was like an amazing game.
Oh my gosh!
But especially if you're as a Cardinals fan,
one of the greatest games ever.
Totally. But the other part of it was like, I'm going to Game 7. Like there's going to be a Game 7.
Purely selfish. Okay, so that that gives a little more context to the video too.
Yeah, that was a anytime cards are in October baseball, it's fun.
Yeah, that's great. Grant, thanks again for taking the time. Grant Baldwin with thespeakerlab.com. You can find him at grantbaldwin.com. He's on Twitter. Just search Grant Baldwin. He's got a YouTube channel that I think is phenomenal. A lot of his stuff is just good information. If you're interested in public speaking at all and you want training, he has so much free stuff, but then he has courses. He has a podcast that's how I found out about Grant myself. I've listened to dozens and dozens of his episodes. It's just great content. And Grant, I'm just so thankful for this time.
Travis, I appreciate it, man. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was good.